say 1.5 horsepower per cubic inch, please listen to me, that's a mistake. I'm trying to say 1.5 foot-pounds per cubic inch. And we can just take our ARP calculator for our old people, and we can go in here and we can get a 100 cubic inch engine times 1.5, and that will give us 150 foot-pounds of torque, okay? That's at the flywheel. So when we have 3 dynos to work with, which we did last year, we had a DTS engine dyno, we had a Superflow engine dyno, and we had a Dyno Jet chassis dyno. What we learned there was there is some handicaps that the engine has to pull along. It's the drivetrain, the transmission, the drive shaft, the chain, the sprockets, the wheel, the tire. So we had also a dyno to measure what the power output was to the tire. The Dyno Jet chassis dyno would tell us how much torque and horsepower the engine would put to the tire. We found out that along the way that it was around 13% or 16% loss. There were parasites on there that would actually sap some of the power away. So if you had, I wrote down on the side over here just for examples, if you had a pro stock motorcycle like Matt Smith, say for instance, where he has 340 horsepower at the tire, divided by 85% would give him 400 output. So the same engine, and not just calling out Matt Smith, but our pro stock engine, we had 400 on one dyno and we had 340 on the other dyno, so that gave us about 15%. Right now, everybody that watches knows about my, not everybody, but the people that notice, I have a CVO Road King. I'm gonna move this a little closer. 2003 CVO Road King that has 180 horsepower at the tire, divided by 85% would give me a net of 211 horsepower output to the flywheel output, where that means if I had just this engine on the DTS engine dyno, I could get 211, but since I bolted it in the motorcycle, transmission, clutch, chain, sprockets, rear tire, wheel, and all the parasites and all the stuff that it has to drag along behind it, you only get about 85% of the power. So we can convert that backwards. I took the Pro Stock engine dyno at 400 horsepower, and only 85% of that actually goes to the tire, which equals 340. So you can do some math here, you guys. You can do it backwards, or you can do it forwards. 400 times 85% equals 340, or 400 or 340 divided by 85 gives you 400. So you can do it forward and backwards. I also did cubic inches times 1.5 foot-pounds per cubic inch. Buck, my CVO, has a 129 engine in it, and it says it would have 193 foot-pounds of torque on the engine dyno. Given the 85%, that gives me 164 foot-pounds at the tire. Now, that 85% is a little bit questionable on that particular combination, and I'll explain why in a minute. I also wrote down over here that the 1.5 pounds-feet per cubic inch is based on having 8 cylinders, because there are 8 brothers and sisters turning the same crankshaft, and they're all pulling in the same direction. And you guys that work on V8s will know some cylinders help more than others. Just like in our families, if you have a family with 8 siblings, there is always the one that does the most, and there's one brother or one sister that does the least, but they're still a V8 family. Hey, Nick. Hey, Mark. Hey, Erwin. I just wanted to tell y'all this is all opinion, and I'm going to tell you back it down to the Georgia or country boy viewpoint, y'all. These are my opinions, not the internet opinions, not the engine builders of the year opinions, not the world record holder opinions, but just my opinions as generalized numbers that if you take notes, we can use to learn from and to compare. I like this 1.5 pounds-feet per inch as a general rule. When a guy tells you he's got an unbelievably or unheard of potential for his torque numbers are unbelievable. Normally aspirated on gasoline, y'all. Normally aspirated on gasoline. 1.5 pounds-feet per cubic inch to the flywheel with 8 cylinders. and that's to the flywheel. So I put 1.5 pounds-feet per inch with 8 cylinders at the flywheel. Now, what does that mean to a chassis dyno? Well, an 8-cylinder on the chassis dyno, like a V8, Chevelle, 427, stick shift, you might be 13% loss through that whole drivetrain. If it's got a big heavy-duty electronic transmission with overdrive, underdrive, lockup converter, and about 3 different ratios and a ton of heavy parts, this thing might be 16% loss through the drivetrain. Hey, Daniel, Laura. Oh my gosh, I just described your family, and you're the one that does all the work. Oh my gosh, you should ask the other 7 of the people in your family, Laurie, and ask them if you're the one that does it. If they all agree, then that's cool, because see, if that's you, if you're the guy that does all the work in the family, that means that you need to turn the timing and the heat up on the other siblings, and then you need to get you a little drink with an umbrella in it and cool off. Hey, Ricky, Jamie, back to this story. My point about the 8 cylinders, I want you guys to know that when you have 8 cylinders and your crankshaft's turning and you have a firing stroke every 90 degrees, bang, 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 on the crank. It's got 720 degrees to get the 4 strokes done, the intake, the compression, the power, and the exhaust. And you got a firing cylinder. One of the siblings on that crankshaft family is helping, firing. Keeps that wheel going, makes a lot of smooth power. Now let's go back to just 1 cylinder. That guy, 1 guy, no brothers and sisters, 1 crankshaft, and it goes bang. And then the flywheel inertia has to squeeze it to compress it, then bang. Then it goes to pushing the exhaust out, and then it has to use the flywheel inertia to draw some more intake in, and then it uses flywheel inertia to squeeze it and then light it, and then bang. So it only has 1 guy helping, so it does not make the same torque per cubic inch as an 8-cylinder. So that means a 2-cylinder makes less torque, and I'm not talking about a lot. It might be, when you do this math over here, a single cylinder, you might have to do, it might only get 84% of the power output. And a V10 or V12 might do more than that. So these are just things to consider when you're going to be so absolute about math. Math is great. Math is a good starting point. And that's why I'm saying this 13 to 16% has got such a range to it. And this has a range to it. I was just talking to a friend on the phone a minute ago, and he told me he knows of some engines that make 1.6 pounds-feet per cubic inch. Okay? Well, there are some, and are normally aspirated and gasoline-powered. There's really, really good stuff around 1.5 foot-pounds per cubic inch. Now, diesels, turbocharged, nitrous oxide, and supercharged turbos, nitrous oxide, methanol, nitro, all those cool things, man, they make unbelievable amounts of torque per cubic inch. That's why it wants to blow the head off and blow the rings off. The head gaskets having a hard time keeping the family together there. Head tries to blow off, tries to break the head studs, tries to stretch the studs. Head gaskets spraying out everywhere. The rings are trying to blow off the pistons. That's because it's making a lot more than your parts are designed for. 1.5 pounds per pounds-feet or foot-pounds of torque per cubic inch is very, very strong. All right, and I also wrote down here empirical data results. Somebody says, well, I don't know about the single-cylinder results. I don't know about the twin-cylinder or the 4-cylinder results. And given all the years with the DTS engine dyno, given all the years with the Superflow engine dyno, and given all the years with the DynoJet chassis dyno, we did get to learn some of that stuff crossing over. And our world, our industry, our hot rod Harley industry this is the only thing that matters right now, the DynoJet chassis. But the guy with an engine dyno that would really get after it, like we did with the SNS 160 or some of the other engines like our Suzuki's, like Vance and Hines does. Vance and Hines does a great job with that. Matt Smith does a great job with that. Those guys are developing engines based on an engine dyno because they tune the engine. A chassis dyno a lot of times you're tuning the whole motorcycle. And when you only have a chassis dyno, you get great results if you test correctly. And the guys that are running pro stock right now with chassis dynos, most of them can't control the tire or the clutch, so therefore they get really poor data. It's hard to measure that stuff like you can with an engine dyno. And on our engine dynos, where we ran just the engine, we would make sure nothing slipped, and we got direct results, and it tore up a lot of parts. And if you're running an 8-cylinder on an engine dyno, it is like an electric motor, so smooth. And I know an engine and a motor are two different things. Hey, Bryce. Hey, David. Brenton. JJ. I just want to say hi. But having an electric motor style run where a V12, a V10, or a V8 are so smooth in power output and power delivery. But if you take that same dyno that can handle 2,000 horsepower like this DTS engine dyno and put a V-twin with 60 degrees odd fire, where one cylinder fires 400 degrees and then 315 degrees later the other one fires, and then 405 to the front, then 315 to the back, then 405, and it just keeps banging and jerking and banging and jerking and starting and stopping and starting and stopping. A little baby 160 cubic inch V-twin can tear one of these brutal dynos up if you don't dampen the engine. It's really, really hard to watch how bad one of those V-twins would run on any one of these Superflows or the DTS engine dyno. All right, I'm putting some zero weight in the pipe. Hang on. Gotta have lube on them pipes, man. Hey, Tim. Hey, Brian. Hey, Michael. So let's do a little bit ideas here. What's a really good known engine package right now? I'll try with my what you call this thing. This is a AARP calculator. Let's try and get in close with this. There we go. I'll try and make it show up on this phone. All right, am I losing y'all? All right, let's take a Harley right now that's real popular. It's a 131, okay, times 1.5 foot-pounds per cubic inch. 196. That is a lot of torque. 131 times 1.5 equals 196, okay? Let's do 131. Since it's a V-twin, let's try times 1.4. Times 1.4 foot-pounds per cubic inch. Still too much, 183. All right, let's take that 183 that you would see if it was tuned up right, had the right camshaft, and it had all the right pipe and the right tuning and everything, and that would be at the flywheel. So let's do 183 divided by 85%. I did that backwards. 183 times 85% equals 155 foot-pounds. Now, that is a rear wheel foot-pounds. We have all perused and checked and shopped around on the internet, and we found 155 available on a 131. Yours might not have it. Screaming Eagle right out of the box might not have it, but there are people that are watching Tech Talk right now that post dyno sheets of a 131 Harley engine with 155 foot-pounds of torque on the dyno sheet. Now, that's also could be what we do is for pump gasoline, where you're going to drive around on the street, we do 1.2 horsepower per cubic inch on pump gas. That's 157 horsepower at the rear tire. So if we have 157 horsepower at the rear tire on a 131 Harley, and we divide that by 85%, let's see, 131 times 1.2 equals 157 horse at the rear tire divided by 85%. 184 horsepower at the flywheel. That same 131 engine has to make 185 horsepower at the flywheel in order to give you 157 or 158 at the tire. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand that? This is just basic things that we have learned over the years because we were fortunate enough to work with engine dynos and a chassis dyno, and we had all the same day. And look, the percentages, I read of them, heard of them a few times, but I got to tell you what we found is when we got our school bikes that we ran for 23 years at Frank Hawley's drag racing school, and they were Suzuki 2-valve old wore-out Pro Stock engines that we detuned by running 2 exhaust cams on it to make sure that the valve springs would last, and we could beat them to death for 38 runs a day, which is so brutal. Run 7-second motorcycles, 30-something runs. It was a heck of a time. For you guys, 8 or 100 of you that went to that school, you remember how cool that was. But what we found out was if it had 305 horse or so on the engine dyno, it would have 85% less on the DynoJet chassis dyno. And we just went and did it on the DTS dyno. We ran them. We put it on the Superflow dyno and we ran them. And then we put the engine in the bike and took them to the DynoJet chassis and ran them. And it proved to be somewhere between 13 and 16%. Boy, that's easy for you to say. Don't even make me try and say that word again. Also, with our Pro Stock motorcycle that was going 670s last time we were racing, back in this same time, 5 years ago, running 670s, we were making 340 at the tire and 400 at the crank. Now, I want to go back to this first thing that I just left off when I started. That the camshaft is the brains of the engine. I got to back up so you can get the whole statement in there. Camshaft is the brains of the engine. I'm going to explain to you why I say that. That 131 Harley engine or your 500 cubic inch Chevrolet, Chrysler, Ford, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Motorcraft, Mercury, whatever your 500 is. A 131 Harley, if you put a stock camshaft in it, it's going to make less than 1 horsepower per cubic inch. If you put Harley's torque cam in it, it's going to make about 20 more horsepower. And if you put a better cam in it, it's going to make more horsepower because the engine is still going to be 131 cubic inches. The engine is dictated. There's no displacement, no replacement for displacement. Big engines rule. The engine is just an air pump, 1.5 foot-pounds per cubic inch. Now, go back to that 131. What's cool about that 131 is it's going to make that much torque if you do everything right. But this number of how much horsepower per cubic inch it's going to make is hugely controlled by how much air moves in and out of the engine. The torque is whatever the torque number is measured on this dyno, engine dyno, let's say whatever it has, times RPM divided by 5252 equals the horsepower at whatever RPM you check it out. And I know I've said that 1,000 times, but the camshaft is the brains of the engine. It tells the engine whether it's a race engine, it's a street engine, or it's a touring engine, or you're just going to make a air compressor engine, or a generator engine, or a stationary power plant, or whatever. The camshaft tells the engine that. You can take the same engine, and I had the guys at GRC, at Gardner Racing Concepts. They had a crate engine, a 131 Harley crate engine, and I sent them 3 camshafts, and I said, dyno this engine, please, for me. And I paid them to do an independent study for me, and my goal was to see what this would look like. And I'm going to draw a rough result right here because this is not exactly how it looked, but I'm going to attempt to draw this while you're looking live. The engine made this much power. And with the 30/30 cam, it made this much power. And with the full race cam, it made this much power. Over here, the 30-30, over here, the 30-30 cam was the all-star. But he also, when we got past 5200, he fell off a little bit because it was a 131 and it wasn't quite enough cam for an engine that big. But the full race, absolutely love the RPM. So it took the 30-30, the 3/4, and let me get over here where you can see. The 30-30, the 3/4, and the full race changed the characteristics and the personality of the engine. As a matter of fact, it creates the personality of the engine. The small, medium, and large. Excuse me. The small, medium, and large. The small, medium, and large. I'm going to have to put this where I can see my finger. The small cam, the medium cam, and the large cam worked this side of 5200. Over this side of 5200 RPM, the large cam was lower, the medium cam was the middle, and the little cam was the biggest. That's the personality and the brains of the engine. Okay, my time is up. I made it. We lived through it, all y'all. Mark, Bill,